I should have seen it coming the moment Lisa's Mercedes pulled into my driveway that Christmas Eve. The way she surveyed my home, not with the warmth of a sister returning for the holidays, but with the calculating gaze of someone assessing property. First, it had been snowing all morning in Madison, blanketing my front yard in 6 inches of pristine white, the kind that makes everything look like a postcard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'd spent hours decorating the house, determined to make my first time hosting our family Christmas perfect. The pine garland wrapped around the banister, twinkling lights framing every window, and the scent of cinnamon and cloves filling the air from the potpourri that Mom had always used when we were kids. Lisa stepped out of her car wearing designer boots that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, her husband Mark trailing behind her with their matching luggage. She didn't hug me first. She walked past me straight into the entryway, eyes scanning the vaulted ceiling of the living room, the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself last summer, the built-in bookshelves that had sold me on the house 3 years ago. "Well, you've certainly made yourself comfortable here," she said, brushing snow from her cashmere coat onto my welcome mat. The words sounded pleasant enough, but there was an edge beneath them, sharp as icicles. I ignored it, chalking it up to travel fatigue and the usual tension that accompanied family gatherings. "Thanks for having us, Jenny," Mark said, offering a smile that seemed genuine enough as he stomped snow from his boots. "Place looks great." I'd always liked Mark, even if he did tend to follow Lisa's lead in most things. They'd been married for 5 years, and I'd watched him gradually adopt her mannerisms, her opinions, her way of viewing the world as something to be possessed rather than experienced. But there were moments like now when I caught glimpses of the person he'd been before. Warm, a bit awkward, genuine. "Thanks," I said, helping him with their bags. "I've put you two in the blue room upstairs. Bathroom's been renovated since you last visited." "This place is really coming together," he observed, and there was a note of surprise in his voice that made me wonder what Lisa had been telling him about my humble 3-bedroom craftsman. Lisa was already wandering through the house, fingers trailing over the dining room table I'd set with Grandma Thompson's china. "Mom and Dad should be here soon," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Michael and Diane are coming tomorrow morning. Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol are joining us for dinner." Lisa nodded absently. "You know, when Grandpa left this place to you, I don't think any of us expected you'd actually fix it up." There it was. The first jab, barely 5 minutes in the door. Grandpa Thompson had left me his house when he passed away 3 years ago. It had needed work, a lot of work, but it had good bones and a history of family holidays that I couldn't bear to see sold to strangers. Lisa and Michael had received other assets. Lisa got the vacation cabin in Minnesota and a sizable investment portfolio, while Michael received Grandpa's classic car collection and timberland in northern Wisconsin. None of us had complained about the arrangement. It had seemed fair at the time. "It's been a labor of love," I said, refusing to take the bait. "Coffee's fresh in the kitchen if you want some." "I'll take mine with almond milk," Lisa said, still examining the built-in cabinet where I displayed family photos. "You do have almond milk, don't you?" I did, actually. I'd stocked the fridge with everyone's preferences, determined to avoid the small irritations that could spiral into family arguments. That was my role in the Thompson family. Peacekeeper, mediator, the one who remembered birthdays and dietary restrictions and who couldn't be seated next to whom at dinner. As I poured Lisa's coffee, I heard the crunch of tires on the snow-covered driveway. My parents had arrived, right on time. Dad's punctuality was legendary in our family, a trait from his 30 years in the military that retirement hadn't softened. I watched through the kitchen window as Dad helped Mom from the passenger seat, her movements careful on the slippery driveway. She'd had hip replacement surgery 8 months ago, and while she'd recovered well, winter conditions still made her nervous. Dad's hand on her elbow was both supportive and protective, a gesture that caught in my throat. 42 years married, and he still looked at her like she was everything. "Mom and Dad are here," I called out, setting Lisa's coffee on the counter. She didn't respond, but I heard her footsteps moving toward the front door. By the time I joined her, she was embracing our mother, exclaiming over how well she looked, how the Wisconsin winter suited her. "Jenny!" Mom beamed when she saw me, extending her arms for a hug. "The house looks just magical, sweetheart." "Thanks, Mom," I said, breathing in her familiar scent of Chanel No. 5, the same perfume she'd worn for as long as I could remember. "How was the drive from Green Bay?" "Clear roads until we hit the Madison city limits," Dad answered, setting their suitcases in the entryway. "Then it was slow going. You've done a fine job with the walkway, though. Well salted." From my father, this was high praise. John Thompson didn't believe in effusive compliments. He believed in noting when things were done correctly. "I'll take your bags upstairs," I offered. "I've put you in the main guest room, the one with the attached bath." "Perfect," Mom said, already removing her snow boots. "Helen, you'll want to see what Jenny's done with the kitchen," Lisa interrupted. "She's really made changes." The way she emphasized changes made it sound like I'd committed some kind of sacrilege. I caught Dad's eye, and the slight raise of his eyebrow told me he'd noticed it too. The next few hours passed in the familiar rhythm of family arriving for the holidays. Dad installed himself in the living room armchair, watching the weather forecast with intense concentration. Mom moved between helping me in the kitchen and resting her hip on the sofa. Lisa and Mark unpacked upstairs, their voices occasionally drifting down the stairwell. I was sliding a tray of Christmas cookies into the oven when Lisa appeared at my elbow, startling me. "So," she said, leaning against the counter, "how's the job search going?" My stomach tightened. I'd been laid off from my position as a project manager at a local tech company 2 months ago, another casualty of third-quarter budget cuts. I'd been freelancing since then, picking up enough work to keep up with the bills while I looked for something permanent. "It's going," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I've had a few promising interviews." Lisa nodded, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both sympathy and superiority. "Must be tough, keeping up with the house payments on freelance income." I closed the oven door with perhaps more force than necessary. "I'm managing." "Of course you are," she said, her voice honeyed with false concern. "But you know, if things get tight, there are options. The housing market in Madison is really strong right now." "I'm not selling the house, Lisa." She shrugged, the picture of casual indifference. "Just thinking about your future. This place is awfully big for one person." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol. I brushed past Lisa, grateful for the interruption. Whatever game she was playing, I wasn't interested in being a participant. The evening progressed, with the predictable ebb and flow of family gatherings. We ate the lasagna I'd prepared the day before, drank the wine Dad had brought from a local Wisconsin vineyard, and exchanged stories about Christmases past. Lisa was uncharacteristically quiet through dinner, observing more than participating. I caught her gaze lingering on the dining room crown molding, the refinished hardwood floors, the updated light fixtures, all improvements I'd made over the past 3 years. It wasn't until after Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol had left, and our parents had retired to their room, that Lisa finally showed her hand. Mark had gone upstairs to take a call from his office, leaving the two of us alone in the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast colorful shadows across her face as she swirled the last of her wine in her glass. "Jenny," she began, her voice soft but intent. "I've been talking to a real estate attorney about Grandpa's will." My body went still, alert in the way prey animals sense danger before they see it. "Oh?" She nodded, setting her empty glass on the coffee table. "There's been some confusion about the terms of inheritance, specifically about this house. There's no confusion, I said, keeping my voice level. Grandpa left the house to me. The will was clear. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's the thing. Lisa leaned forward, her expression a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't as clear as we all thought. The attorney says there's a strong case that the property was meant to be shared equally between the three of us, with you having right of residence until certain conditions were met. What conditions? I asked, though a part of me already knew where this was heading. Financial stability, she said simply. The will specified that you could live here as long as you maintained steady employment and kept up with the property, taxes and maintenance. With you being laid off? The room seemed to tilt slightly. That's not what the will said. I have a copy upstairs. Lisa waved a dismissive hand. The copy you have doesn't include the codicil that was added later. Grandpa was concerned about your financial history. My financial history. She meant the student loans I'd finally paid off last year, and the 6 months after college when I'd moved back home to save money. In Lisa's narrative, these normal life experiences were evidence of some fundamental instability, proof that I couldn't be trusted with something as significant as property ownership. There is no codicil, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite the anger building in my chest. You're making this up. I'm trying to help you, Jenny, she said, and the false sympathy in her voice made my skin crawl. The attorney thinks we have a solid case to petition for shared ownership. Mark and I would buy out your share, of course. You'd have enough money to get a nice condo, something more manageable. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Lisa didn't just want a share of the house. She wanted the whole thing. The house that I'd poured my savings into renovating. The house where we'd celebrated every Christmas until Grandpa got too old to host. The house that had been my anchor during the worst storms of my adult life. No, I said, and the simplicity of the word seemed to take her by surprise. Jenny, be reasonable. You're unemployed. The property taxes alone are paid through. Next year? I finished for her. And I'm not unemployed, I'm freelancing. Successfully, I might add. Lisa's expression hardened, the pretense of concern falling away. This isn't just about you. That house has been in our family for generations. It should be preserved properly. Which is exactly what I'm doing, I countered. With what money? She asked, her voice sharpening. We all know you've been struggling. It's only a matter of time before you fall behind. I stood, suddenly unwilling to continue this conversation. I think you should talk to your real estate attorney again, Lisa. There is no codicil. The house is mine, legally and completely. She rose too, her height, always a few inches more than mine, allowing her to look down at me physically as well as metaphorically. We'll see about that. I've already spoken to Mom and Dad. They agree it might be for the best if you consider our offer. That stung more than I wanted to admit. You did what? They're worried about you, Jenny. We all are. This house is too much responsibility for someone in your situation. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. We're done with this conversation. Good night, Lisa. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I could feel her eyes on my back, calculating and cold. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay awake, replaying the conversation, trying to understand how my sister, who had shared my childhood, who had once been my closest confidant, could look at my home and see only something else to possess. The next morning dawned bright and cold, sunlight gleaming off the snow that had fallen overnight. I was in the kitchen early, preparing breakfast before the rest of the house stirred. The methodical tasks of measuring coffee grounds, whisking, eggs, and slicing fruit gave my hands something to do while my mind raced with contingency plans. Lisa's claim about a codicil was nonsense. I was certain of that. but her mention of having already spoken to our parents worried me. Mom and Dad had always tried to stay neutral in disagreements between their children, but they also tended to trust Lisa's version of events. As the oldest, she'd cultivated an image of infallible competence that was hard to challenge. I was setting a platter of French toast on the table when Michael and Diane arrived, their 2-year-old daughter Emma in tow. The kitchen quickly filled, with the chaos of greetings, the distribution of overnight bags, and Emma's delighted discovery of the Christmas tree. "The house looks amazing, Jenny," Diane said, accepting a mug of coffee gratefully. "Those kitchen cabinets are new, right?" "Refinished them myself this summer," I confirmed, pleased that she'd noticed. Diane had always been observant, one of the many qualities that had made me instantly like my brother's wife. "She's been very busy playing HGTV," Lisa commented, entering the kitchen with Mark a step behind her. "Morning, Michael. Diane?" If Michael noticed the edge in Lisa's voice, he gave no indication. "Morning. Man, it smells good in here. Jenny's famous French toast?" "With extra cinnamon, just how you like it," I confirmed, trying to focus on the simple pleasure of feeding people I loved. Breakfast was a noisy affair, with Emma providing most of the entertainment as she alternated between eating enthusiastically and sharing detailed stories about her preschool adventures that only she could fully understand. I was grateful for the distraction, for the buffer that Michael and Diane's presence provided between me and Lisa. But as the meal wound down and people dispersed, Mom and Diane taking Emma upstairs to get cleaned up, Dad and Michael heading to the garage to look at a leaky faucet I'd mentioned, I found myself once again alone with Lisa and Mark. "Did you think about our conversation?" Lisa asked without preamble. I started gathering plates, needing something to do with my hands. "There's nothing to think about. The house is mine." Mark cleared his throat awkwardly. "Jenny, we're not trying to put you out. The offer would be fair market value, and with the improvements you've made, that's substantial." "It's not about the money," I said, stacking dishes with more force than necessary. "Then what is it about?" Lisa asked, her voice rising slightly. "Stubbornness? Some misguided attachment to a property you can barely afford?" I turned to face her, dish towel twisted between my hands. "It's about respecting Grandpa's wishes. It's about the fact that I love this house and have put 3 years of work into making it a home. And yes, it's about the fact that you're trying to manipulate me with lies about a codicil that doesn't exist." "Ladies," Mark began, but Lisa cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Fine. If you want to be difficult, we can do this the hard way," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper as we heard footsteps on the stairs. "But don't say I didn't try to make this easy for you." The rest of the day passed in an uneasy truce. We went through the motions of Christmas Eve traditions, baking cookies, watching holiday movies, preparing for the big family dinner planned for the following day. Lisa maintained a cold politeness that fooled our parents, but not me. I could feel her watching, waiting for an opportunity to continue her campaign. That opportunity came after dinner, when the whole family was gathered in the living room. Emma had finally fallen asleep on Diane's lap, exhausted from the excitement of Christmas Eve. Dad was telling one of his famous long-winded stories about his military days, a glass of bourbon in hand. It was a moment of perfect family harmony, which, of course, was when Lisa chose to strike. "So," she said during a lull in conversation, her voice carrying just the right note of casual interest. "Jenny hasn't told you all about the exciting changes we've been discussing." Every eye in the room turned to me. I froze, my mug of hot chocolate halfway to my lips. "What changes?" Mom asked, looking between us with curiosity. Lisa smiled, a perfect display of teeth that never reached her eyes. "About the house. We've been talking about a new arrangement that would benefit everyone." "What kind of arrangement?" Michael asked, his brow furrowing. "Lisa thinks there's a codicil to Grandpa's will that gives her claim to the house," I said flatly, refusing to let her control the narrative. There isn't. Mom's expression shifted to concern. A codicil? This is the first I'm hearing about. This. It's the first anyone's hearing about it, I said, because it doesn't exist. Lisa's smile didn't waver. The attorney I consulted seems to think otherwise. And given Jenny's current employment situation, it might be time to reconsider the original arrangement. What employment situation? Michael asked, looking at me with confusion. I sighed. I was laid off 2 months ago. I've been freelancing while I look for a new position. It's fine. It's not fine, Lisa insisted. The terms of inheritance were clear. Stable employment was a condition of sole ownership. Dad set his bourbon down with deliberate care. That's not what Richard's will said. Richard, Grandpa Thompson. The firm tone in Dad's voice made Lisa hesitate for the first time. The will you saw might not have included the updated terms, she said, but there was a new wariness in her voice. I was the executor of my father's estate, Dad said, each word measured and precise. There was no codicil. A flash of uncertainty crossed Lisa's face, quickly masked. The attorney said, Which attorney? Dad interrupted. Lisa glanced at Mark, who was studying the pattern of the area rug with sudden intense interest. James Wilson. Dad actually chuckled, a short, dry sound. James Wilson retired 5 years ago. Try again, Lisa. The room fell silent. I could almost see Lisa recalculating, adjusting her strategy in real time. The point, she said finally, is that Jenny can't afford to maintain this property on her own. It would be better for everyone if Mark and I took over. We'd keep it. In the family, make sure it's properly preserved. Is that what this is about? Michael asked, looking incredulous. You want Jenny's house? It's not just Jenny's house, Lisa snapped, her composure finally cracking. It's our family home. It should be managed by someone with the resources to do it properly. Grandpa left it to Jenny, Michael said flatly. End of story. Because he felt sorry for her. Lisa's voice rose, her careful facade falling away completely. Because she was always struggling, always the one who needed help. But I'm the one who checked on him every week. I'm the one who took him to appointments. I'm the one who deserves this house. The outburst left everyone stunned. Mom's hand had flown to her mouth. Dad was sitting unnaturally still. And Michael was staring at our sister like he'd never seen her before. Even Mark looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact with everyone. In the heavy silence that followed, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. This wasn't about the house at all. It was about Lisa's perception of fairness, about her eternal conviction that she deserved more than she received. Lisa, Mom began gently, but I interrupted. It doesn't matter who deserves what, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The legal reality is that Grandpa left the house to me. There is no codicil. There are no conditions about employment, and I'm not selling, to you or anyone else. Lisa looked around the room, seeking an ally and finding none. Fine, she said finally, her voice tight with suppressed fury. If that's how you want to play this, I've already spoken to a lawyer about contesting the will. We'll let the courts decide. And there it was, the nuclear option. I should have been scared. A legal battle would be expensive, stressful, potentially devastating. But instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Before you do that, I said, standing up, there's something you should know. I walked to the secretary desk in the corner of the living room, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a folder I'd placed there earlier that day, after my conversation with Lisa had left me restless and worried. I'd hoped I wouldn't need it, but I'd learned long ago that hope wasn't a strategy. What's that? Lisa demanded, eyeing the folder suspiciously. Documentation, I said simply, returning to my seat. When Grandpa left me the house, he also left. Me a letter explaining why. I've never shown it to anyone because it felt private, but under the circumstances, I pulled out a single sheet of paper, Grandpa's distinctive handwriting covering both sides. He knew you'd be upset, I continued, looking directly at Lisa. He knew you'd think it was unfair, so he explained his reasoning, and he did something else too. Lisa's expression had shifted from angry to wary. What are you talking about? Grandpa didn't just leave me the house, I said quietly. He left. Me, the mortgage. Confusion crossed her face. The mortgage was paid off decades ago. The original mortgage, yes, I agreed. But not the second mortgage he took out 5 years before he died. The one for $200,000. The color drained from Lisa's face. Most of that money went to medical expenses, I continued, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. But a significant portion, about $50,000, was given to you and Mark as a loan for the down payment on your house in Chicago, a loan that, according to this letter, was never repaid. Mark shifted uncomfortably. That was a gift, he muttered. Richard said we didn't need to pay it back. He said no such thing. Dad interjected, his voice hard. I was there. When he wrote the check, it was explicitly a loan with the understanding that you'd repay it when you were able. Lisa's shock was quickly giving way to anger. So what? That has nothing to do with this house. Actually, it does, I said, pulling another document from the folder. When Grandpa realized he was running out of time, he restructured his affairs. The mortgage on this house was transferred to me. I own the debt. And according to this clause here, I pointed to a paragraph on the document. The loan to you and Mark was rolled into that debt, to be forgiven only if the terms of the will were respected. That's not possible, Lisa whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. It's not just possible, it's legal and binding, I said. So yes, Lisa, you can contest the will, you can drag this into court. But if you do, I'll be forced to call in the loan. $50,000 plus 7 years of interest. By my calculation, that's close to $70,000 now. The room was so quiet you could hear the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Lisa stared at me, then at the documents in my hand, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, defeat. You're bluffing, she said at last, but her voice was weak. I held out the papers. See for yourself. She didn't take them. Instead, she looked at Dad, a silent appeal for intervention, but his expression remained impassive, offering no escape. I don't want your money, Lisa, I said softly. I never did. All I want is the home Grandpa entrusted to me, and the peace to enjoy it with the family I love, including you. For a moment, I thought she might lash out again, might escalate the confrontation despite the evidence stacked against her. But instead, she stood abruptly. I need some air, she announced, and walked out of the room without another word. Mark hesitated, looking torn between following his wife and staying to smooth things over. Finally, with a mumbled apology, he went after her. In the silence that followed their departure, I became acutely aware of the rest of my family staring at me. Mom looked worried, Dad thoughtful, Michael astonished, and Diane impressed. Jenny, Mom began, perhaps you should have told us about this sooner. I shook my head. I didn't want it to come to this. I was hoping Lisa would let it go. She never lets anything go, Michael said, shaking his head. You should know that by now. Is it true? Mom asked, looking at the papers still in my hand. About the loan? Dad nodded before I could answer. It's true. I helped Dad set it up before he passed. We hoped it would never be an issue, but he trailed off, his expression a mixture of sadness and resignation. Do you really own the mortgage? Diane asked, her voice tinged with admiration. I nodded. Grandpa transferred it to me along with the deed. He said it was his insurance policy, his way of making sure his wishes were respected after he was gone. Smart old man, Michael murmured. We sat in silence for a moment, the the Christmas tree lights casting colored patterns across the room. Outside, the sound of a car door slamming echoed in the quiet night. A minute later, the front door opened and closed, and Lisa and Mark reappeared in the doorway. Lisa's eyes were red-rimmed, her composed facade completely gone. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the revelation of a truth she'd been avoiding for years. "I don't want to ruin Christmas," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we just put this aside for now, please?" It was perhaps the first genuine thing she'd said since arriving. I studied her face, searching for any hint of the calculation I'd grown accustomed to seeing there. But all I found was exhaustion and a reluctant surrender. "Of course," I said, returning the documents to their folder and setting it aside. "It's Christmas Eve. We're family." She nodded once, sharply, then moved to sit next to Mark on the love seat, as far from me as the room allowed. The air didn't dissipate entirely, but it eased enough that conversation gradually resumed. Hesitant at first, then flowing more naturally as the evening wore on. Later, as everyone was heading to bed, Lisa paused at the bottom of the stairs, waiting until we were alone. "I was wrong," she said simply, the words clearly costing her. I nodded, accepting the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get. "Grandpa knew what he was doing," I offered. "He loved all of us, Lisa. He just understood that we needed different things." She absorbed this in silence, then turned to go upstairs. "The cabinets do look good," she said over her shoulder. "You've done well with the place." It wasn't a white flag of surrender, not exactly. Lisa would always be Lisa, competitive, calculating, convinced of her own superiority. But it was an acknowledgement, however small, that perhaps Grandpa had been right after all. As I moved through the quiet house, turning off lights and checking that doors were locked, I found myself pausing in the living room, looking at the Christmas tree with its familiar ornaments, many handed down through generations of Thompsons. In the reflection of a silver ball, I caught a distorted image of myself, small but present, a keeper of this home and all it represented. "Thanks, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty room, and I could almost hear his gruff voice in response. "You earned it, kiddo. Don't let anyone tell you different." Outside, snow had begun to fall again, adding another layer of white to the world. Tomorrow would bring presents and Christmas dinner and all the joys and tensions of family gathered. Close, but for now, in this quiet moment, I was exactly where I belonged, in the house that had seen generations of Thompsons through their best and worst moments, and would continue to do so, as long as I had anything to say about it. The morning, after Lisa's revelation about wanting my house, brought a fresh blanket of snow across Madison. I'd slept fitfully, our conversation replaying in my mind each time I drifted toward consciousness. When I finally gave up on sleep at 6, the sky was just beginning to lighten, turning the snow-covered yard into a canvas of soft blue shadows. I crept downstairs, careful not to wake anyone. The house was peacefully quiet, no hint of the tension that had crackled through it the night before. In the kitchen, I started the coffee maker and leaned against the counter, letting the familiar morning ritual center me. Through the window, I could see the old oak tree in the backyard, its branches heavy with snow, exactly as it had been when Grandpa was alive. Grandpa Thompson had been a man of few words but deliberate actions. He'd lived in this house for over 50 years, raised his children here, and later welcomed his grandchildren for summers and holidays. I still remembered the way he'd pat my shoulder when I helped him in the garden, his gruff voice saying, "Good job, Jenny girl." In his quiet way, he'd recognized something in me that my more ambitious siblings had missed, an appreciation for roots, for history, for the simple satisfaction of caring for a place and making it thrive. "You're up early." I startled at my father's voice, nearly spilling my coffee. Dad stood in the doorway, already dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt, despite the early hour. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted. He nodded, reaching for a mug from the cabinet. Lisa has that effect on people. The dry comment surprised a laugh out of me. Dad wasn't known for humor, especially at his eldest daughter's expense. You heard everything. Last night? I asked as he poured his coffee. Enough. He added a single spoonful of sugar, no more, no less, and stirred precisely 3 times. Military precision, even in breakfast rituals. Your sister has always had a talent for rewriting history to suit her purposes. I blinked, taken aback by his candor. You never said anything. Dad took a sip of his coffee, considering. Not my place to get between you kids. Your mother and I agreed on that early on. But this is different. She's trying to take my house. And you handled it. He looked at me over the rim of his mug, a hint of approval in his eyes. You didn't need me to step in? The simple statement warmed me more than the coffee. From Dad, this was high praise indeed. I didn't want to use Grandpa's letter, I said softly. It felt like a betrayal of confidence. Dad set his mug down. Richard knew Lisa better than anyone. That's why he left you the contingency plan. You knew about the mortgage transfer? About the loan? I helped him set it up. Dad's expression softened just slightly. He was proud of you, Jenny. Said you were the only one who saw the value in things beyond their price tag. My throat tightened unexpectedly. I miss him. We all do. Dad glanced around the kitchen. You've done good work here. Richard would approve. Before I could respond, footsteps on the stairs signaled that more of the household was stirring. Dad gave me a small nod, the moment of unusual openness closing as naturally as it had begun. Merry Christmas! Mom called as she entered the kitchen, her face bright with the anticipation of the day ahead. If she was concerned about last night's confrontation, she showed no sign of it. Merry Christmas, I echoed, pushing thoughts of Lisa and her schemes to the back of my mind. Today was for family celebration, not conflict. The next hour passed in a whirlwind of breakfast preparation, present arranging, and Emma's growing excitement as she realized what day it was. My niece was a tornado of energy, darting between the Christmas tree and the kitchen, her voice rising an octave every time someone mentioned presents. Michael and Diane came downstairs next, bleary-eyed but smiling, followed by Mark, who offered to help with breakfast. There was no sign of Lisa. She's getting ready, Mark explained when Mom asked, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. She'll be down soon. The unspoken hung in the air. Lisa was strategizing, deciding how to navigate the Christmas morning festivities after her failed power play the night before. I busied myself with the waffle iron, determined not to let her absence disrupt the day. When she finally appeared, hair perfectly styled, wearing a cashmere sweater dress that probably cost more than all my presents combined, her expression was composed, giving nothing away. Merry Christmas, everyone, she said, her voice neutral. Her gaze skipped over me, landing on Emma, who was attempting to teach my father a complicated hand-clapping game. And there's my favorite niece. Come give Aunt Lisa a hug. Emma happily obliged, and just like that, the morning shifted into the familiar rhythm of Christmas Day. We ate breakfast, then gathered around the tree for presents, taking turns opening gifts while Michael recorded everything on his phone. For posterity. Though we all knew the videos would never be watched again. I'd put thought into each gift. A handmade quilt for Mom featuring fabric from family vacations over the years. A rare military history book for Dad. A set of vintage Star Wars action figures I'd found at an estate sale for Michael, who collected them. A pottery class gift certificate for Diane, who'd mentioned wanting to try it. And a custom-built dollhouse for Emma, painted to match our family home. For Lisa and Mark, I'd chosen a weekend getaway at a luxury resort in Door County, the kind of indulgence they appreciated. When Lisa opened the envelope, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed her face. This is very generous, she said, the hesitation in her voice revealing more than she probably intended. She'd expected something lesser, perhaps, a token gift that reflected the strained relationship between us. I thought you and Mark could use a weekend away, I said simply. The lakeside suite has a great view. She nodded, avoiding my eyes. Thank you. Lisa's gift to me was a designer scarf, beautiful but impersonal, clearly purchased without much thought beyond its brand name. I thanked her sincerely anyway, wrapping it around my neck to model it for everyone. The gift exchange complete, we moved on to preparing Christmas dinner. The familiar domestic chaos of too many cooks in the kitchen provided a welcome distraction from lingering tension. Dad carved the turkey with military precision, Mom supervised the gravy making, Michael peeled potatoes while debating football stats with Mark, and Diane organized the children's table for Emma and the neighbors' kids who would be joining us. Later. Lisa hovered at the edges, offering occasional advice but mostly observing. I caught her watching me several times, a strange, thoughtful expression on her face that I couldn't quite read. It wasn't until mid-afternoon, when most of the family had scattered for a post-meal rest, that she approached me directly. I was in the kitchen, packaging leftovers into containers for everyone to take home. Need help? She asked, startling me. I recovered quickly. Sure, there are more containers in that drawer. She retrieved them, then began efficiently separating turkey slices into family-sized portions. We worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the click of plastic lids and the distant murmur of Christmas movies from the living room. The house really does look good, she said finally, not meeting my eyes. The kitchen especially. Thanks, I said cautiously. It's been a lot of work. I can tell. She sealed a container of stuffing with more force than necessary. I just don't understand why he left it to you. And there it was, the real issue, raw and exposed. Not the house itself, but what it represented. Grandpa's choice, his final statement about what he valued and who he trusted. I set down the serving spoon I was holding. Does it matter? It was his decision to make. Of course it matters, she said, her voice low but intense. I was the one who visited every week. I was the one who took him to appointments, who helped. With his finances, I was the responsible one. And he appreciated that, I said carefully. He left you the cabin, the investments. It's not about the monetary value, she interrupted. This house was his legacy, the center of the family, and he gave it to you who could barely keep a job for more than a year at a time. The accusation stung, partly because there was a kernel of truth in it. My early 20s had been unstable, a period of searching and false starts, but Lisa's characterization neglected the full picture. I changed careers twice, I corrected her. That's not the same as not being able to keep a job, and for the past 5 years, until the layoff, I was with the same company. She waved a dismissive hand. The point is, I was the steady one, the reliable one. I earned this house. The entitlement in her voice was so breathtaking that for a moment, I could only stare at her. In Lisa's world, everything was transactional. Love, care, family. All of it could be tallied into columns of debt and payment. Grandpa didn't see it that way, I said finally. He didn't think the house was something to be earned. It was something to be loved, to be preserved. And you think you're doing that? She challenged. I know I am. I gestured around us. Every improvement I've made has been with the house's character in mind. I've researched the original fixtures, matched the historic paint colors, preserved the built-ins instead of replacing them with something modern. With what money? She asked, echoing her question from the previous night. Don't tell me freelance graphic design pays for cedar shingles and custom millwork. I hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Lisa had always been competitive about finances, using her higher salary as a measure of her superior life choices. I've been careful, I said finally. And I do more than just graphic design. I've picked up project management work, some content creation for local businesses. It adds up. She studied me, clearly not entirely convinced. And the layoff? How long can you keep this up without steady income? I have savings, I said, which was true, if not the complete picture. And prospects. Tech companies are already starting to hire again for the new year. Lisa opened her mouth as if to argue further, then seemed to think better of it. She returned to packaging leftovers, her movements brisk and efficient. I'm not going to contest the will, she said after a long silence, just so you know. Relief flooded through me, tempered by wariness. Lisa's concessions always came with conditions. Thank you. But I still think you should consider selling, she continued, confirming my suspicion. Not to me if that's the issue, but to someone who can truly afford to maintain it properly. I can maintain it properly, I said, my voice firm. And I don't want to sell. Not to you, not to anyone. She sighed, closing the last container with a definitive snap. You're being sentimental. It's just a house, Jenny. No, I said quietly. It's not just a house. It's home. It's memories. It's a connection to Grandpa and to our childhood. You know that, or you wouldn't be so determined to have it. Something flickered across her face, too quick to name. For a moment, I thought I'd broken through. Reached the sister I'd once been close to before ambition and comparison had wedged between us. But then her expression smoothed, composure reasserting itself. Well, it's your decision, for now anyway. The qualifier hung in the air between us, a reminder that Lisa might have retreated but hadn't surrendered. I knew my sister well enough to recognize that she was simply regrouping, reassessing her approach. For good, I corrected her. Grandpa made his choice. I'm honoring it. That's the end of the story. She gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. If you say so. Before I could respond, Emma burst into the kitchen, her face alight with excitement. Aunt Jenny! Aunt Lisa! Daddy says we're going to build a snowman. Come help! The moment broke. The conversation shelved but not resolved. Lisa's smile transformed into something warmer as she turned to our niece. A snowman sounds perfect. Let me get my boots. As she left the kitchen, I exhaled slowly, unsure whether we'd made progress or simply postponed the inevitable next round. Either way, I had confirmation of what I'd suspected. Lisa hadn't given up. She'd just changed tactics. The snowman building expedition proved to be exactly the mood lifter the family needed. Even Dad participated, engineering a structurally sound base that he insisted would withstand a Wisconsin winter properly. Mom supervised from the porch, her hip not up for trekking through the snow, but her voice carrying clear instructions about proper carrot nose placement. Lisa maintained her distance from me, focusing her attention on Emma and engaging Mark in elaborate snow sculpture plans. I worked alongside Michael and Diane, the three of us falling into easy conversation about their plans for the coming year. We're thinking of putting an addition on the house, Diane confided as we rolled snow. For the middle section, Emma needs a proper playroom, and if we have another baby... Another baby? I gasped, immediately lowering my voice. Are you... She grinned, shaking her head. Not yet, but we're trying. Don't tell Lisa, though. She'll start sending me fertility charts and ovulation trackers. I laughed, glancing over to where Lisa was instructing Mark on the perfect coal placement for the snowman's eyes. Your secret's safe with me. Speaking of secrets, Michael said, leaning in, what's this about the mortgage thing with Grandpa? Dad was pretty vague when I asked him earlier. I hesitated, not wanting to rehash the conflict, but knowing Michael deserved the truth. Grandpa transferred the mortgage to me when he redid his will. Most of it was his medical expenses, but part of it was a loan he gave Lisa and Mark that they never repaid. Michael whistled low. Clever old man, so you literally own the mortgage? Like you're the bank? More or less, I confirmed. It's not something I ever planned to use against her. It was just insurance. Insurance against Lisa being Lisa, Michael said, nodding sagely. Makes sense. I wouldn't want to be on her bad side right now, though. She looked ready to commit murder last night. She'll get over it, I said, with more confidence than I felt. Eventually. Maybe, Diane said doubtfully. Or maybe not. Lisa isn't exactly known for letting things go. True, but what can she do now? Michael pointed out. Jenny has her over a barrel with that loan. I patted the snowball in my hands, into a smoother sphere. I don't want to hold it over her. I just want her to respect Grandpa's wishes and leave the house alone. Good luck with that, Michael muttered, but his tone was sympathetic rather than skeptical. We completed the snowman as the winter daylight began to fade. The result, a slightly lopsided but charming creation wearing one of Dad's old military caps and a scarf that Mom had knitted years ago. Emma declared it the best snowman in the whole world, a verdict no one was inclined to dispute. As we trooped back inside for hot chocolate, I found myself walking beside Mark, who had been unusually quiet throughout the day. Everything okay? I asked, brushing snow from my gloves. He glanced ahead to where Lisa was deep in conversation with my mother, then lowered his voice. I didn't know about the loan, he said. Not the full amount, anyway. Lisa told me it was a small gift from your grandfather, maybe 10,000, not 50. The admission surprised me. I assumed you both knew. He shook his head, his expression troubled. Lisa handled all the financial arrangements. She just told me we had enough for the down payment and not to worry about where it came from. I wasn't sure how to respond. Mark and Lisa's financial arrangements weren't my business, but the revelation that she'd hidden the true nature of the loan from her own husband was concerning. What will you do now? I asked carefully. He sighed, his breath forming a cloud in the cold air. Talk to her, I guess. Not today, it's Christmas, but soon. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I think your grandfather made the right choice with the house. You've done amazing things with it. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. That means a lot. He nodded, then hurried to catch up with Lisa, leaving me to wonder about the conversation they would eventually have, and what it might mean for my sister's campaign to take my home. The rest of Christmas Day passed without further incident. We ate leftovers for dinner, played board games that Emma could join in, and watched classic holiday movies until it was time for her bedtime. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been the night before, but an undercurrent of tension remained, particularly when Lisa and I found ourselves in the same room. By 9 o'clock, the day's festivities had taken their toll. Mom and Dad retired. To their room, Michael and Diane took Emma upstairs to bed, and Mark excused himself to answer work emails, leaving Lisa and me alone in the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast a warm glow across the room, reflecting off the ornaments we'd helped Grandpa hang every year of our childhood. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the silence heavy with unresolved feelings. Do you remember the year Grandpa let us decorate by ourselves? Lisa asked suddenly, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. You must have been about 8, which would make me 11. The memory surfaced immediately, Grandpa Thompson standing back, arms crossed as we argued over where to place each ornament. You put all the red balls on one side, I recalled, smiling despite myself. Grandpa said it looked like the tree was blushing. Lisa laughed, the sound startlingly genuine. And you hung all the animal ornaments at the bottom so they could see each other. They were friends, I defended, the decades-old logic still making perfect sense to me. The giraffe needed to talk to the elephant. We both fell silent again, the shared memory creating a momentary bridge across the chasm that had formed between us. I studied my sister's profile, trying to reconcile the ambitious, calculating woman she'd become with the girl who had taught me to tie my shoes and braid my hair. Why did we stop being friends? I asked, the question slipping out before I could reconsider it. Lisa looked startled, then thoughtful. Did we? Stop being friends? You know we did, I said quietly. Somewhere between high school and now, we became competitors instead of sisters. She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had since the day Mark had placed it on her finger. I didn't see it that way. No? I raised an eyebrow. Then how would you describe trying to take my house out from under me? She flinched slightly. That's not... I wasn't thinking of it as taking something from you. I was thinking of it as correcting an imbalance. An imbalance, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Because you think you deserved the house more than I did. I think Grandpa didn't fully consider the practical implications of his decision, she said carefully. You struggle financially, Jenny. That's not a judgment. It's a fact. This house requires resources to maintain properly. And yet I've managed. For 3 years without any help, I pointed out. The house is in better shape now than when Grandpa left it to me. Because you've poured every cent you have into it, she countered. At the expense of your own financial security. What happens when the roof needs replacing, or the foundation needs work? These are expensive problems, and they're inevitable. In a house this age. There was a grain of truth in her concerns, which made them harder to dismiss. I had indeed spent most of my savings on home improvements, confident that my stable job would allow me to rebuild my emergency fund. The layoff had thrown that plan into disarray. I'll figure it out, I said, with more confidence than I felt. I always do. Lisa studied me, her expression skeptical, but not unkind. You shouldn't have to figure it out alone. That's my point. If we shared ownership, we'd constantly be fighting over every decision, I finished for her. You'd want to modernize, I'd want to preserve. You'd see it as an investment, I see it as a home. She didn't deny it. We could establish clear boundaries, a legal agreement about who controls what aspects. I shook my head, amazed at her persistence. That's not what Grandpa wanted. He didn't leave the house to us jointly for a reason. Because he was sentimental, she said, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. He saw himself in you, the dreamer, the one who valued history over practicality. Is that so bad? I asked, genuinely curious about how she saw our grandfather, a man we had both loved but perhaps understood differently. Lisa sighed, leaning back against the couch. No, it's not bad. It's just impractical. Sentiment doesn't pay for property taxes or new water heaters. Maybe not, I conceded. But it's what makes a house a home. It's why this place matters to both of us in the first place. She considered this, her gaze moving around the room, taking in the details. The bookshelf Grandpa had built, the window, seat where we'd read stories, the mantel with its collection of family photos spanning generations. I do love this house, she admitted quietly. But I also worry about it, about whether it's in the right hands for the long term. The comment stung, but I recognized it as possibly the most honest thing she'd said since arriving. Lisa's concern, however misguided, came from a place of genuine attachment to our family home. I understand that, I said carefully, but you need to understand something too. This house is more than just a possession to me. It's my anchor. When everything else in my life has been uncertain, careers, relationships, finances, this place has given me stability, a sense of belonging. You could have that anywhere, she argued, but with less conviction than before. No, I couldn't, I said simply. This is where I'm meant to be. Grandpa knew that, even if you can't see it. Lisa opened her mouth as if to argue further, then closed it, unexpectedly yielding the point. You really won't consider selling? Not even if your financial situation worsens? Not even then, I confirmed. I'll take second jobs, rent out a room, whatever it takes. But this house stays in the family, with me as its caretaker. That's Non-negotiable. She nodded slowly, something like resignation passing across her face. All right, I won't bring it up again. I eyed her warily, not quite trusting this sudden capitulation. Just like that? A wry smile tugged at her lips. Well, you do have 70,000 reasons why I should drop it. The reference to the loan made me wince. I don't want to hold that over you, Lisa. That's not why Grandpa told me about it. No? Then why did he? I considered my answer carefully. I think he wanted me to understand that choices have consequences, that you can't always have everything you want, even if you think you deserve it. She absorbed this, her expression unreadable. A lesson for me, delivered through you. Typical Grandpa, making his point even from beyond the grave. He loved you, I said softly. He was proud of your success, your ambition. He just worried sometimes that you valued the wrong things. And you value the right ones? There was an edge to the question, but genuine curiosity too. I shrugged. I value different ones. Family history, preservation, making something old beautiful again, rather than replacing it with something new. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, then said, I'm still not convinced you can maintain this place on your own. But she took a deep breath as if the words cost her. I respect that you're determined to try. It wasn't approval exactly, but it was something close to acceptance. From Lisa, that was significant progress. Thank you, I said simply. She nodded, then stood, smoothing her dress with practiced precision. It's been a long day. I think I'll head to bed. Good night, I said, watching as she crossed the room with her characteristic, purposeful stride. At the doorway, she paused, turning back to face me. The renovation work really is impressive, Jenny. You've honored the house's character while making it your own. Grandpa would be proud. The compliment, unexpected and seemingly sincere, left me momentarily speechless. By the time I recovered, Lisa had already disappeared up the stairs, the soft tread of her footsteps fading as she headed to the bedroom. I remained in the living room, surrounded by the glow of Christmas lights and the tangible presence of family history. Lisa's concession hadn't resolved everything between us. Decades of competition and misunderstanding couldn't be undone in a single conversation. But it felt like a beginning, a hesitant step toward something that resembled the sisterhood we'd once shared. Outside, snow was falling again, adding another layer to the already white landscape. I moved to the window, watching the flakes drift down in the glow of the street lamp. The neighborhood was quiet, most houses dark except for the colored glow of Christmas lights. In a few days, everyone would return to their own homes, their own lives. Mom and Dad back to Green Bay, Michael and his family to Milwaukee, Lisa and Mark to Chicago. But I would remain here, in the house that had seen generations of Thompsons through their joys and sorrows. The house that Grandpa had entrusted to me, believing that I, of all his grandchildren, would understand its true value. As I turned away from the window, my gaze fell on the old secretary desk in the corner, where I'd stored the folder containing Grandpa's letter and the mortgage documents. I hadn't wanted to use them, had hoped Lisa would respect his wishes without the leverage of financial obligation. But perhaps this was how it was meant to play out, the final lesson from a grandfather who had always taught by example rather than instruction. I ran my hand along the banister as I climbed the stairs, feeling the smooth wood beneath my fingers, polished by decades of Thompson hands. Tomorrow would bring another day of family, of navigating the complex currents of sibling relationships and parental expectations. But tonight, in the quiet of Christmas evening, I felt a sense of peace settling over the house and over me. Whatever Lisa decided when she returned to Chicago, whether she truly accepted Grandpa's decision or simply retreated to plan another approach, I knew with certainty that I was where I belonged. This house, with its creaky floors and drafty, Windows, its history embedded in every wall and door frame, was home in the deepest sense of the word. And no one, not even my determined sister, was going to change that. The day after Christmas dawned with a stillness that only follows major holidays. That peculiar quiet when the anticipation has passed and reality settles back in. I woke early, padding downstairs in my slippers to start coffee before anyone else stirred. The living room still bore the cheerful aftermath of yesterday's celebration. Wrapping paper I hadn't gotten around to collecting, new gifts arranged on side tables, and Emma's toys scattered beneath the tree. Through the kitchen window, I watched. A cardinal land on the snow-covered bird feeder Grandpa had built decades ago. Its bright red plumage stood in vivid contrast to the white landscape. Grandpa had loved cardinals, said they reminded him of my grandmother who always wore red lipstick and had a fondness for flashy accessories. Like little messengers, he'd told me once, letting me know she's still keeping an eye on things. I smiled at the memory, wondering if the cardinal was Grandpa's way of sending his own message this morning. If so, I hoped it was one of approval. The confrontation with Lisa had been uncomfortable but necessary, and while I wasn't sure we'd reached a true resolution, the air felt clearer between us. The coffee maker gurgled its last, and I poured myself a cup, adding a splash of the cinnamon creamer I kept on hand for special occasions. The house was quiet, everyone else still sleeping off the previous day's festivities. These early morning moments were my favorite, the house to myself, the day's possibilities still unfolding. I carried my coffee to Grandpa's old study, now converted into my home office. Unlike the rest of the house, which I'd renovated with careful attention to its original character, this room I'd made entirely my own. My drafting table stood by the window to catch the northern light. Shelves, lined with design books and reference materials, covered one wall. A comfortable reading chair occupied the corner where Grandpa's recliner had once been. I settled at my desk, opening my laptop to check emails. Freelance work didn't stop for holidays, and I had a logo design due for a local bakery by the end of the week. As I scrolled through messages, a notification appeared from my bank. The automatic mortgage payment had gone through, a transaction that still gave me a small jolt whenever I saw it. The mortgage. The loan. Lisa's face when I revealed what I knew. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the memory. I hadn't wanted to use that information as a weapon, had hoped we could resolve things without it. But Lisa had forced my hand, and now I had to live with the consequences of that revelation. Would it permanently damage our already strained relationship? Or could it somehow clear the air, allow us to build something more honest? There you are. I startled at the sound of Mark's voice, nearly spilling my coffee. He stood in the doorway, already dressed in jeans and a sweater, his own coffee mug in hand. "Sorry," he said, looking genuinely apologetic. "Didn't mean to scare you." "It's fine," I assured him, closing my laptop. "Just jumpy this morning. Did you sleep okay?" He nodded, hovering awkwardly in the doorway as if unsure whether to enter or retreat. "Mind if I—" He gestured vaguely toward the room. "Of course. Not. Come in." He stepped inside, glancing around with appreciation. "Nice space. Very you." "Thanks." I watched as he examined the framed architectural sketches on the wall, my own drawings of historic Madison buildings I particularly admired. "Early riser?" "Always have been," he confirmed, moving to the window that overlooked the backyard. "Lisa sleeps in when she can, especially after intense family gatherings." The hesitation in his voice told me all I needed to know about their post-Christmas conversation. "You talked to her about the loan." It wasn't a question, but he nodded. Anyway, his shoulders tight with tension. "Yeah, last night, after everyone went to bed." "How did that go?" He turned from the window, his expression troubled. "About as well as you'd expect. She's embarrassed, angry, both at me for bringing it up and at herself for being caught in the lie. I winced. I'm sorry, Mark. I never intended for this to cause problems between you two. Don't be, he said firmly. This isn't on you. Lisa made choices to borrow money from your grandfather, to misrepresent the amount to me, to hide the fact that it was never repaid. Those are on her, not you. The directness of his response surprised me. Mark had always struck me as easygoing, to the point of passivity, especially when it came to Lisa's more forceful personality. This new assertiveness was unexpected. Still, I said carefully, family finances are complicated. I shouldn't have put you in this position. He shook his head, settling into the reading chair across from my desk. You didn't. Richard did, and he had his reasons. He took a sip of his coffee, then added, good ones, apparently. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning I had no idea Lisa was so fixated on this house, he admitted. She's never even mentioned wanting it before this trip. Then suddenly, it's this all-consuming mission to correct your grandfather's mistake. It's not like her to be so irrational. I hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of my sister, but needing to be honest. It's exactly like her, Mark. Lisa has always had very fixed ideas about what belongs to her, what she deserves. But the house was clearly left to you. There's no ambiguity there. That's never stopped Lisa from rewriting the narrative to suit her purposes. I traced the rim of my coffee mug, choosing my words carefully. When we were kids, I had this set of watercolors our aunt gave me for my birthday. Lisa decided they should have been hers because she was the artistic one. She didn't even want, to paint. She just couldn't stand that I had something she didn't. Mark looked troubled. And now it's the house. Now it's the house, I agreed. Except this isn't a set of watercolors and we're not children anymore. He was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee as if the answers might be found there. I tried to talk her out of this whole plan, he said finally. When she first mentioned contesting the will, I told her it was a bad idea. That we don't need another house, especially not one in Wisconsin when our lives are in Chicago. He sighed. She wouldn't listen. Lisa rarely does when her mind is made up. No, he agreed, a hint of weariness in his voice. She doesn't. We sat in silence for a moment, the early morning light strengthening as it filtered through the curtains. Outside, the cardinal had been joined by its mate, both of them pecking at the seeds I'd put out the day before. What will you do now? I asked, genuinely curious about his position in all of this. Mark set his mug down, rubbing his hands over his face. I don't know. We have a lot to talk about when we get home. The loan, the house, the fact that she hid the truth from me. It's a lot. I never meant to come between you, I said softly. You haven't, he assured me. If anything, you forced a necessary conversation, one we probably should have had years ago. He hesitated, then added, Lisa and I have always had different ideas about money. I grew up with parents who lived within their means, who saved for things they wanted. Lisa wants what she wants when she wants it. Consequences be damned. It was the most critical I'd ever heard Mark be of my sister, and the candor of it surprised. No, that sounds challenging. He laughed, a short, humorless sound. That's one word for it. Financially terrifying would be another. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. Did you know we're carrying nearly $40,000 in credit card debt? I tried not to let my shock show on my face. No, I had no idea. Neither did I until about 6 months ago, he admitted. Lisa had been handling all our finances. Said, it made sense since she works in banking. I trusted her completely, never even looked at the statements. He shook his head, disbelief still evident in his expression. When I finally found out, she told me it was temporary, that she had a plan to pay it all off with her year-end bonus. I take it that didn't happen? Her bonus was less than she expected, he said simply. And now I find out we've been sitting on this unpaid loan for 7 years. It's a pattern, Jenny. one I've been willfully blind to for too long. The vulnerability in his admission made my chest tighten with empathy. Mark had always been the steady one in Lisa's orbit, the counterbalance to her more volatile personality. Seeing him this shaken was unsettling. "What do you want to do about the loan?" I asked. Carefully. He straightened, his expression resolute. "Pay it back, with interest, like your grandfather intended. I don't care what Lisa says, we owe that money, and it's going to be repaid." "Mark, I wasn't planning to collect." "I know," he interrupted. "But I need to do this. For my own peace of mind, if nothing else." He met my gaze evenly. "I'll set up a payment plan when we get back to Chicago. It might take some time, but you'll get every penny back." The determination in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just about money for Mark, it was about integrity, about righting a wrong that had festered too long. "Okay," I said simply. "We can work something out." He nodded, a tension visibly releasing from his shoulders. "Thank you. For understanding, and for being who you are. This house is lucky to have you." The compliment warmed me unexpectedly. "That's a nice thing to say." "It's true." He looked around the room appreciatively. "I can see why Richard left it to you. You get it. Not just the physical structure, but what it represents. The history, the connections." Before I could respond, footsteps in the hallway announced another early riser. A moment later, my father appeared in the doorway, already dressed and ready for the day. "Morning," he said, nodding to us both. "Coffee on?" "Fresh pot in the kitchen," I confirmed. "Good." He glanced between Mark and me, a hint of curiosity in his expression. "Everything all right in here?" "Just fine, John," Mark assured him, standing up. "Jenny and I were just discussing some family business." Dad raised an eyebrow but didn't press for details. "Right. Well, your mother's awake, Jenny, wondering about breakfast plans." "I'll get started on something," I said, rising from my desk. "Pancakes okay with everyone?" "Perfect," Dad agreed, then turned to Mark. "You mind helping me with something in the garage first? Need an extra pair of hands." Mark seemed surprised by the request, but nodded readily. "Of course." I watched them go, wondering what my father really wanted. Dad wasn't one for casual conversation, especially not with in-laws. If he was seeking a private word with Mark, it was for a specific purpose. In the kitchen, I found Mom already setting the table, moving with the careful deliberation that her new hip required. "You shouldn't be doing that," I chided gently, taking the stack of plates from her hands. "That's what you have 3 adult children for." She smiled, patting my cheek affectionately. "Old habits. Besides, I'm perfectly capable of setting a table, Jennifer." The use of my full name, always a sign that she wouldn't be dissuaded, made me smile. "At least sit down while I make breakfast. Dad's kidnapped Mark for some mysterious garage errand, but they'll be back soon." "Your father likes Mark," she said, settling at the kitchen table. "Says he has good structural integrity. High praise, coming from him." I laughed, mixing pancake batter with practiced ease. "I like him too. He's good for Lisa. Steadying." Mom watched me work, a thoughtful expression on her face. "They had words last night, after everyone went to bed." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh?" She toyed with the edge of a napkin. Something about finances from what I could overhear. Lisa was upset. I focused on measuring vanilla extract, not wanting to reveal what I knew. Christmas can be stressful. "Jenny," Mom's tone made me look up. "I'm not blind, nor am I deaf. I know Lisa tried to take this house from you, and I know you stopped her with that loan information." I sighed, setting down the measuring spoon. "I didn't want to involve you and Dad in this. It's between Lisa and me." "It's family business," Mom corrected, "which makes it everyone's business." Your father and I have stayed out of it because you're adults and need to resolve your own conflicts. But don't think for a minute that we don't see what's happening." Her directness was unexpected. Mom usually preferred to smooth over conflicts rather than address them head-on. "What do you think about it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "About Lisa trying to contest the will?" Mom considered the question, her expression thoughtful. "I think your sister has spent her entire life believing that success is measured by what you have, not who you are. It's partly our fault. We praised her ambition, her achievements. Perhaps too much." The admission surprised me. "You think Lisa turned out this way because of how you raised her?" "I think we all become who we are through a combination of nature, nurture, and our own choices," Mom said carefully. "Lisa was always driven, always competitive. Your father and I could have done more to channel those traits in healthier directions." I poured batter onto the hot griddle, watching the pancakes begin to bubble. "It's not too late. Lisa's not a bad person, Mom. She's just struggling to understand what truly matters," Mom finished for me. "I know, and I'm glad you can see that despite how she's treated you." I flipped the pancakes, considering. "It's easier to be understanding when you've won the battle." Mom laughed softly. "True enough, but not everyone would be so gracious in victory." "I don't want it to be about winning or losing," I admitted. "I just want my home, and maybe someday my sister back, the way we used to be." "That may take time," Mom cautioned. "Lisa has a lot to work through, not just about the house, but about herself. What kind of person she wants to be." The back door opened, admitting Dad and Mark from their garage expedition. Both men stamped snow from their boots, cheeks ruddy from the cold. "Smells good in here," Dad observed, hanging his coat on the hook by the door. "Pancakes are almost ready," I confirmed. "Where did you two disappear to?" John was showing me the original blueprints for the house, Mark explained, washing his hands at the kitchen sink. "They were in that old filing cabinet in the garage. Fascinating stuff." I raised an eyebrow at my father, who shrugged innocently. Thought he might be interested, being in real estate and all. There was more to it than that, I was certain. But before I could probe further, the sound of footsteps on the stairs announced more family members joining us. Emma burst into the kitchen first, still in her pajamas, her face alight with morning energy. "Pancakes!" she exclaimed, scrambling onto a chair. "Can I have chocolate chips in mine, Aunt Jenny? Please?" "Of course." "You can, sweet pea," I assured her, already reaching for the bag of chocolate chips I kept on hand for just such requests. Diane followed, tying her robe as she entered. "Emma, honey, inside voice, remember? Not everyone is as wide awake as you are." "Sorry, Mommy," Emma stage whispered, making everyone smile. Michael appeared next, hair tousled from sleep, but eyes alert. "Coffee," he mumbled, making a beeline for the pot. We settled into the comfortable rhythm of a family breakfast, passing plates and syrup, discussing plans for the day. The only person missing was Lisa, a fact that didn't go unnoticed as the meal progressed. "Should someone check on her?" Mom eventually asked, glancing toward the stairs. Mark shook his head. "Let her sleep. She had a restless night." The slight hesitation told me all I needed to know about the aftermath of their discussion. I caught Mark's eye across the table, a silent question in my gaze. He gave a small nod. Everything was under control, or as much as it could be. After breakfast, the day unfolded with the lazy pace of post-holiday family time. Dad and Michael took Emma sledding on the hill behind the house, their laughter drifting back to us through the cold air. Mom and Diane settled in the living room, with books and tea, occasionally chatting but mostly enjoying the quiet companionship. Mark disappeared upstairs, presumably to check on Lisa. I used the time to catch up on work emails, responding to clients, and outlining the next steps for ongoing projects. Freelancing during the holidays was a balancing act, but one I'd grown accustomed to. The flexibility it offered was worth the occasional holiday interruption. Around noon, as I was finishing a proposal for a new client, a knock at my office. Doctor drew my attention. Lisa stood there, fully dressed but subdued, her usual polish dimmed by what looked like a sleepless night. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. "Of course." I gestured to the reading chair Mark had occupied earlier. "Come in." She entered, closing the door behind her, a sign that whatever she wanted to discuss was meant to stay between us. Instead of taking the chair, though, she moved to the window, gazing out at the snowy yard where Emma was now building a snow fort with Michael's help. "Mark told me about your conversation this morning," she said finally, her back still to me, about his plan to repay the loan. I waited, sensing she had more to say, and knowing from experience that pushing Lisa rarely led to productive outcomes. "I told him it was unnecessary," she continued, "that you weren't really expecting repayment after all this time. But he insisted." She turned then, facing me directly. "He's setting up a payment plan as soon as we get back to Chicago. Monthly installments until the full amount, with interest, is repaid." "He mentioned that," I confirmed. "I think it's honorable of him." Something flickered across her face, pride, perhaps, or resignation. "Mark has always been honorable. It's one of the reasons I married him." She hesitated, then added, "One of the reasons I sometimes take advantage of him." The admission, so frank and self-aware, caught me off guard. Lisa rarely acknowledged her own faults, especially not to me. "That's unusually introspective of you," I said cautiously. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Don't get used to it. I had a lot of time to think last night, that's all." She crossed the room, finally taking the seat across from me. "I owe you an apology, Jenny." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "I'm sorry." "What?" "An apology," she repeated, looking uncomfortable but determined. "For trying to take your house. For lying about the codicil. For a lot of things, probably." I studied her face, searching for signs of insincerity or hidden agenda. Finding none, I sat back in my chair, genuinely stunned. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she assured me. "Just listen, okay? Because this isn't easy for me, and I'd like to get through it without interruption." I nodded, still too surprised to form a coherent response. Lisa took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've spent most of my adult life believing that success is measured in very specific ways: career advancement, financial achievements, property ownership. It's how I was raised, how I was educated, how the world has always affirmed me." She glanced around my office, her gaze lingering on the architectural sketches. "But when Grandpa left this house to you instead of me, it disrupted that narrative." "Lisa," she held up a hand, "please, let me finish. This is important." She waited until I nodded, then continued. "At first, I told myself it was because you needed it more, that Grandpa felt sorry for you, the struggling one, the uncertain one. That made it easier to accept, because it fit my worldview. You got the house because you were less successful, not because you deserved it more." The assessment stung, but I remained silent, honoring her request to listen. But then I saw what you've done with the place, she went on. How you've preserved its character while making it functional for modern living, the careful attention to detail, the respect for its history. And I realized something uncomfortable. Grandpa didn't leave you the house because he felt sorry for you. He left it to you because he knew you would love it the way he did. Her voice caught slightly on the last words, a rare display of emotion from my normally composed sister. "The truth is, I wouldn't have done the same," she admitted. "I would have gutted it, modernized everything. probably flipped it for a profit as soon as the market was favorable. Because that's how I see property, as an investment, not a legacy. She met my gaze directly. Grandpa knew that, and he made his choice. Accordingly, the honesty in her assessment left me momentarily speechless. Lisa had always been perceptive about others, but rarely so clear-eyed about herself. I don't know what to say, I admitted finally. Except, thank you for understanding. She nodded, a hint of her usual briskness returning. Well, it took me long enough, and a $70,000 wake-up call. She attempted a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Mark and I had a long talk last night. About the loan, about our finances in general. It wasn't pretty. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. I never wanted to cause problems between you two. You didn't, she assured me. If anything, you forced a conversation we should have had years ago. She sighed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair, a small but telling sign of her distress. We've been living beyond our means for a long time. The credit card debt, the unpaid loan. It's all part of a pattern I've been unwilling to acknowledge. I hesitated, not wanting to overstep but feeling I should offer something. If you need help with financial planning, I know someone. A friend from college who specializes in debt management. She's helped a lot of people get back on track. Lisa looked up, surprise evident in her expression. You'd do that? Help us? After everything? Of course I would, I said simply. You're my sister, Lisa. That matters more than any disagreement about property or inheritances. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. I haven't been a very good sister to you, have I? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with years of competition and missed connections. I could have answered with brutal honesty, could have listed all the ways she had hurt or dismissed me over the years. But looking at her now, Lisa, who never admitted weakness, sitting in my office with her guard down, I chose a different path. We've both made mistakes, I said carefully. But we're here now, having this conversation. That counts for something. She nodded, a hint of gratitude in her expression. I'd like to start over, if that's possible. Not erase the past, but move forward differently. I'd like that too, I said, and meant it. Lisa stood, smoothing her slacks with habitual precision. Good. Then that's settled. She paused, glancing around the office once more. You've really made this space your own. It suits you. Thanks, I said, touched by the genuine compliment. It's where I do my best work. Speaking of work, she said, a familiar briskness returning to her tone. Mark mentioned you're freelancing. Now, what exactly do you do? Graphic design, mostly, I explained. Logo creation, branding packages, web design for small businesses. Some architectural rendering for local firms when they need it. She raised an eyebrow, looking intrigued despite herself. And that's sustainable? Financially, I mean? It was before the layoff, I admitted. I'm still building back up to a full client roster, but yes, it's viable. I enjoy the variety and the freedom to choose projects that interest me. Lisa nodded, processing this in the analytical way she approached all information. Have you considered corporate clients? They pay better than small businesses, and the contracts tend to be more stable. I shrugged. I've worked with a few, but it's not really my focus. I prefer helping local businesses develop their visual identity. It's more personal, more creative. But less profitable, she pointed out, then immediately held up a hand. Sorry, old habits. Your priorities are your business. I smiled, appreciating the effort it took for her to check her natural inclination to optimize everything for maximum financial return. Actually, I've been thinking about expanding in a different direction. Historical preservation consultation. Her brow furrowed. What's that, exactly? Helping homeowners and businesses renovate historic properties while maintaining their architectural Integrity, I explained, warming to the topic. Madison has a lot of protected buildings, but people often don't know where to start with preservation-minded updates. I could bridge that gap, provide design services that honor a building's history while making it functional for contemporary use. Lisa considered this, her expression thoughtful. That actually makes a lot of sense for you. Combines your design skills with your passion for historical architecture. Exactly. I was surprised by her understanding, having expected the usual dismissal of any career path that didn't prioritize profit above all else. You should talk to Diane's brother, she suggested. He's in real estate development in Milwaukee, specializes in converting historic buildings into modern spaces. Could be a good connection. The offer of help, so casual yet genuine, felt like another small bridge being rebuilt between us. That would be great, actually. Thanks. She nodded, then glanced at her watch. I should finish packing. Mark wants to get on the road by 2. Beat the worst of the holiday traffic back to Chicago. You're leaving today? I couldn't hide my surprise. I thought you were staying through tomorrow. Change of plans, she said vaguely. Work stuff came up, but we'll try to visit again soon. Maybe in the spring, when you can show us what you've done with the garden. She hesitated, then added, if that's okay with you. Of course it is, I assured her. You're always welcome here, Lisa. This is still your family home, even if I'm the one who lives in it. Something in her expression softened, a tension, releasing that I hadn't fully registered until it was gone. Thank you. That means a lot. As she turned to leave, I remembered something. Lisa, wait. I moved to my desk, opening the bottom drawer where I kept important documents. Before you go, I want to give you something. She watched curiously as I removed a folder, different from the one containing the mortgage paperwork. From it, I extracted a small stack of photographs, ones I'd discovered while cleaning out Grandpa's desk after his passing. These are from that summer at the cabin, I explained, holding them out to her. The one when you taught me to swim in the lake. You were 12, I was 9, remember? She took the photos, her expression softening as she flipped through them. I remember. You were terrified of the deep water, but determined not to show it. You spent hours with me, I reminded her. Patient, encouraging. Told me I could do anything if I just believed in myself enough. I smiled at the memory. That was the summer I realized how lucky I was to have you as a big sister. Lisa looked up from the photos, a rare vulnerability in her expression. I was a better sister then than I have been lately. You were, I agreed. And you can be again. I nodded toward the pictures in her hand. Keep those. They're duplicates. I have copies. She tucked the photos carefully into her pocket, nodding her thanks. I should finish packing, but Jenny? She hesitated, searching for words. Thank you. For everything. After she left, I remained in my office, processing the unexpected turn our relationship had taken. The conflict wasn't fully resolved. Real family healing never happens in a single conversation. But we had taken an important first step. For the first time in years, I felt hope for a genuine reconnection with my sister, one based on mutual respect rather than competition. Outside, Emma's delighted squeals drifted through the window as Dad apparently joined the snow fort construction, his military precision bringing new structural integrity to the project. Mom and Diane had moved to the porch, bundled in blankets as they supervised from a safe, warm distance. And somewhere upstairs, Lisa and Mark were preparing to return to their complicated life in Chicago, hopefully with a clearer understanding of each other and a plan for moving forward. As for me, I was exactly where I was meant to be. In the house that had sheltered generations of Thompsons, that had witnessed countless family dramas and celebrations, that had been entrusted to me by a grandfather who somehow understood what I needed before I did. Not just a physical structure, but a purpose, a legacy to preserve, a home to love. The cardinal returned to the feeder outside my window, joined again by its mate. Together they pecked at the seeds, their bright presence a splash of color against the winter white. Messengers, Grandpa would have said, letting me know that all was well, that the family would endure, that what was broken could, with care and patience, be made whole again. 3 months after that fateful Christmas, spring arrived in Madison with a vengeance. One day there was snow on the ground, and the next, crocuses were pushing through the soil in defiant bursts of color. I spent a Saturday morning on my hands and knees in Grandpa's garden, my garden now, clearing away winter debris and planning what I'd plant when the soil warmed enough. The garden had been one of Grandpa's great joys in his later years. He'd taught me the difference between annuals and perennials, showed me how to test soil pH with a kit from the hardware store, and patiently explained why some plants needed full sun while others thrived in shade. It's about understanding what each living thing needs to flourish, he'd told me once, patting the earth around a newly planted rose bush. Same with people, Jenny girl. Figure out what they need and give them that. I smiled at the memory, brushing dirt from my gloves as I sat back on my heels to survey my progress. The flower beds were cleared and ready for new plantings, the remnants of last year's growth now piled neatly for composting. The vegetable garden plot was turned over, rich black soil exposed to the strengthening spring sun. In a few weeks, I'd plant the tomato seedlings currently occupying my kitchen windowsill, along with beans, cucumbers, and the herbs Grandpa had grown every year. Looking good out here. I turned to find Michael crossing the lawn toward me, a cardboard tray with 2 coffee cups in one hand and Emma's small hand in the other. My niece broke free the moment she spotted me, racing across the grass with the boundless energy of a 3-year-old. Aunt Jenny, we brought coffee and donuts, and I'm going to help in the garden. I laughed, setting aside my trowel to catch her in a hug, careful not to get too much dirt on her bright pink jacket. Well, that sounds like exactly what I need. This morning. Did you bring your gardening gloves? She nodded enthusiastically, pulling a pair of tiny pink gloves from her pocket, a Christmas gift from me that she'd proudly shown off during every video call since. Perfect, I said, giving her another squeeze before releasing her. Why don't you start collecting sticks over by the fence while I talk to your dad for a minute? Emma needed no further encouragement, dashing off toward the fence line with single-minded determination. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees as Michael approached with the coffee. Sorry to drop in unannounced, he said, handing me a cup. We were in the neighborhood for Emma's friend's birthday party, and she insisted on seeing Aunt Jenny's garden. You never need to apologize for bringing coffee and that little ray of sunshine, I assured him, taking a grateful sip. Perfect. Timing, actually. I was just about to take a break. We settled on the wooden bench Grandpa had built near the apple tree, watching as Emma diligently gathered twigs, singing to herself as she worked. So, Michael said after a moment, how are you doing? Really? I glanced at him, noting the concern behind the casual question. I'm good, actually. Busy with work, making progress on the house, no major disasters to report. And the job situation? I smiled, understanding his real concern. After Christmas, Michael had called weekly, clearly worried about my financial stability in the wake of Lisa's revelations about the house and the mortgage. Better than expected, I told him. That preservation consultation idea I mentioned? It's taking off. I've got 3 clients already, all historic homeowners looking for guidance on period-appropriate renovations. Plus, I just landed a contract with the Madison Historical Society to design their new website and branding materials. Michael's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. That's fantastic, Jenny. Sounds like you've found your niche. I think I have, I agreed, feeling the quiet satisfaction that came with doing work I genuinely loved. It combines all my interests: design, architecture, history, and the best part is, I can work from home, which means lower overhead and more time for my own renovation projects. Smart, he nodded approvingly. And speaking of renovations, the place looks great. What's new since Christmas? I gestured toward the house, pride welling up as I surveyed my ongoing work. Finished the upstairs bathroom finally, period-appropriate fixtures but modern plumbing. And I've started stripping the woodwork in the dining room. The previous owners painted over the original oak trim, if you can believe it. Michael winced in the way only a fellow old house enthusiast would understand. Criminal. But if anyone can bring it back to its former glory, it's you. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Emma methodically arrange her stick collection by size. Have you heard from Lisa? Michael asked finally, his tone carefully neutral. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm coffee cup. We talk every couple of weeks. She and Mark came up for a weekend in February, actually. Really? Michael couldn't hide his surprise. How did that go? Better than I expected, I admitted. They helped me strip wallpaper in the guest bedroom. Lisa's surprisingly good at detail work when she puts her mind to it. Huh. Michael took a sip of his coffee, processing this information. And the loan? Any progress there? Mark's made 3 payments already, I confirmed. Right on schedule. I tried to tell them they could take more time, but he was adamant about sticking to the agreement. Good for him, Michael said, a note of approval in his voice. And how are things between them? Lisa seemed pretty upset on Christmas. I considered the question, thinking back to Lisa and Mark's visit. They'd arrived on a Friday evening, their dynamic noticeably different from what I'd observed at Christmas. Mark seemed more assertive, Lisa more willing to listen. They'd moved around each other with a new awareness, like dance partners relearning familiar steps. They're working on things, I said finally. Lisa mentioned they're seeing a financial counselor, and Mark said something about them taking a Dave Ramsey course together. I smiled at the thought of my luxury-loving sister embracing frugality. She complained about it, of course, but I think secretly she's relieved to have some structure. Michael chuckled. Never thought I'd see the day. Lisa, I need those designer boots Thompson on a budget. People can surprise you, I said mildly. She's trying, Michael. That counts for something. He nodded, conceding the point. Fair enough. And how about her attitude toward the house? Still coveting thy neighbor's property? I rolled my eyes at his phrasing, but appreciated the concern behind it. She seems to have accepted that the house is mine. When they visited, she actually helped me research period-appropriate paint colors for the dining room. Found an 1890s catalog reprint that shows what would have been used when the house was built. Wow. Michael looked genuinely impressed. That's, unexpected. I think she's trying to find a way to be connected to the house without owning it, I explained. To honor Grandpa's legacy in her own way. I hesitated, then added, and I think she genuinely wants to repair our relationship. Christmas was a wake-up call for her in more ways than one. Emma came running over then, her arms full of sticks and her face flushed with the importance of her task. Look how many I found, Aunt Jenny. Can we use them to make houses for the garden fairies? That's an excellent idea, I told her solemnly. Fairy houses are very important for a healthy garden. Why don't you start building them over by the rose bushes while I finish talking to your dad? Satisfied with this plan, Emma skipped off toward the rose garden, already deep in conversation with the imaginary fairies who would soon inhabit her creations. She's getting so big, I said, watching her with a pang of wistfulness. Seems like yesterday she was just learning to walk. Tell me about it, Michael agreed. Diane's already researching kindergartens. Not that Emma will start for another year, but you know Diane, always planning ahead. Speaking of planning ahead, I said, remembering something. Did Lisa talk to you about Memorial Day weekend? Michael nodded. She called last week. Suggested we all meet up at the cabin for a family gathering. Mom and Dad are on board. Diane's checking her work schedule, but it should be fine. The cabin, Grandpa's other property, the lakeside retreat, in northern Wisconsin that he'd left to Lisa, had been the site of countless family vacations over the years. Lisa's suggestion that we revive the tradition was another sign of her efforts to rebuild family connections. "I think it's a great idea," I said. "Emma will love the lake, and it'll be nice to see the cabin again. It's been, 5 years?" "At least," Michael confirmed. "Not since before Grandpa got sick." He paused, then added, "Lisa mentioned she and Mark have been fixing it up. New roof, updated kitchen, some other repairs." "That's good to hear," I said, genuinely pleased that Lisa was taking her stewardship of the cabin seriously. It needed some attention. Apparently they're doing it right, keeping the rustic character while making it more comfortable. Lisa specifically mentioned preserving the original knotty pine walls but adding better insulation. He gave me a knowing look. "Sound familiar?" I laughed, recognizing my own renovation philosophy echoed in Lisa's approach. "Maybe I've been a good influence after all." "Maybe you have," Michael agreed, his expression turning thoughtful. "You know, I wasn't sure about Grandpa's decision to split things up the way he did. The house to you, the cabin to Lisa, the cars to me. Seemed like it might create more problems than it solved, but looking back, I think he knew exactly what he was doing." "How so?" I asked, curious about my brother's perspective. Michael gestured toward the house. "This place needed someone who would love it for what it is, who would preserve its history while making it work for the future. That's you, Jenny, through and through." He smiled, a flash of the little boy who'd followed me around when we were kids. The cabin needed someone with Lisa's organizational skills and attention to detail, someone who could manage a property that's used occasionally but needs to be maintained year-round. "And the cars?" He shrugged. "I guess Grandpa knew I'd keep them running and appreciate them for the engineering marvels they are." I considered this assessment, finding truth in it that I hadn't fully articulated before. Grandpa was wiser than we gave him credit for. "Usually the case with the older generation," Michael said with a grin. "We think they're stuck in the past, but really they're just playing the long game." Emma came running back, breathless, with excitement. "Daddy, Aunt Jenny, come see the fairy houses. They're all ready, and the fairies are going to move in tonight." We dutifully followed her to inspect the collection of carefully arranged stick structures, complete with leaf roofs and pebble pathways. I knelt beside her, admiring her handiwork with appropriate enthusiasm. "These are excellent fairy houses," I assured her. "You know, I think we should plant some flowers nearby so the fairies have something pretty to look at. Would you like to help me do that when it gets a little warmer?" Emma's eyes widened with delight. "Yes! Can we plant pink ones? Fairies love pink." "Absolutely," I promised. "Pink flowers for pink-loving fairies." Michael checked his watch. "We should probably get going, Pumpkin. Mom's expecting us back for lunch, and then we need to head home." Emma's face fell momentarily, then brightened. "Can we come back soon? To see if the fairies moved in?" "Any time," I assured her. "The fairies and I will be here waiting for you." After hugs and promises of future garden adventures, Michael and Emma headed back to their car. I watched them go, Emma still chattering excitedly about her fairy houses, Michael listening with the patient attention of a devoted father. Alone again, I returned to my gardening, finding comfort in the rhythmic work of preparing soil and planting plantings. There was something deeply satisfying about continuing Grandpa's traditions, about putting my hands in the same earth he had tended for decades. A text message alert interrupted my thoughts. I pulled off my gloves and fished my phone from my pocket, surprised to see Lisa's name on the screen. "Just confirming Memorial Day at the cabin. Mom says you're in? Bringing anything special from the garden for the weekend? L." The casual tone, the friendly inquiry about my garden, these were small but meaningful signs of Lisa's efforts to rebuild our relationship. I texted back quickly, "Count me in. We'll bring fresh herbs if they're up by then. Looking forward to seeing the cabin renovations." Her response came almost immediately. "Great. Working on the bathroom now. Keeping the clawfoot tub but updating. The plumbing. Sound familiar?" I smiled at the gentle self-mockery in her message, the acknowledgement that she was following in my renovation footsteps. Progress, indeed. Tucking my phone away, I returned to my gardening with renewed energy. The spring air was crisp but warming, the soil rich and promising beneath my hands. In a few months, this space would be transformed, bursting with flowers, vegetables, and herbs, just as it had been during Grandpa's time. Transformation. That seemed to be the theme lately, not just in the garden or the house, but in my relationship with Lisa. Christmas had brought things to a breaking point, forced us to confront years of unspoken competition and resentment. But from that difficult moment, something new was emerging. Not the easy closeness of our childhood, perhaps, but a more mature relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. As I finished my work in the garden, I found myself looking forward to the Memorial Day gathering with genuine anticipation, rather than the usual mix of love and dread that family events often inspired. The thought of seeing the cabin again, of watching Emma experience the lake as Lisa and I had at her age, filled me with a quiet joy. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the last of the daylight fade from the sky, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen, an unusual occurrence given his general dislike of telephone conversations. "Dad? Everything okay?" I answered, a reflexive worry creeping into my voice. "Fine, fine," he assured me, his tone brisk but not alarmed. "Just calling about this Memorial Day plan of Lisa's. Your mother wanted me to check if you need a ride. Up to the cabin." "Oh." I relaxed, smiling at the transparent excuse. Mom could easily have texted me that question herself. "No, I'm all set. Planning to drive up Friday morning. But thanks for the offer." "Good, good," he said, and then fell silent in the way that always indicated he had more to say, but was working up to it. I waited patiently, familiar with his communication style after 32 years as his daughter. "Your sister called earlier," he said finally. "Wanted my opinion on some electrical work they're doing at the cabin, replacing the old fuse box with a proper circuit breaker panel." "Smart upgrade," I commented, knowing Dad would appreciate the practical improvement. "What did you tell her?" "Told her to make sure they hire someone who knows what they're doing with older wiring," he said. "Those cabin electrical systems can be tricky. Lot of DIY work done over the years, not all of it up to code." "Good advice," I agreed. Another pause, longer this time. I sipped my wine, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the branches of the maple tree in my front yard. "She mentioned you'd been up to visit," Dad said eventually. "Helped with some wallpaper removal." "We did," I confirmed. "It was a good weekend. Productive." A thoughtful sound, neither approval nor disapproval. "And how did that go? You and Lisa working together?" The question revealed the real purpose of his call. Dad had never been one to pry into his children's emotional lives, preferring to let us sort out our own problems. But in his own way, he worried about all of us. "It went well," I told him honestly. "Better than I expected. We're finding our way back to being sisters instead of competitors." "Good," he said simply, but I could hear the relief in that single syllable. "Your mother will be pleased to hear it." I smiled, translating the statement to its true meaning. Dad was pleased to hear it, but would never say so directly. "How is Mom?" I asked, allowing him the change of subject. "Hip still giving her trouble?" "Less than before," he reported. "Physical therapy's helping. She's talking about planting flowers again this year." We chatted for a few more minutes about practical matters, Mom's health, Dad's volunteer work at the Veterans Center, the unseasonably warm spring weather. Just as we were about to hang up, Dad cleared his throat, a signal that he had one more thing to say. "Your grandfather would be pleased," he said, the words coming out with the careful deliberation he reserved for important statements. With the house, with you and Lisa working things out, he believed in family above all else. The unexpected comment warmed me more than the wine had. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot coming from you." "Just stating facts," he said, his voice returning to its usual brisk tone. "Well, your mother's calling me for dinner. We'll see you at the cabin." After we hung up, I sat with my empty wine glass, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Dad's words echoed in my mind. He believed in family above all else. It was true, though Grandpa had rarely stated it explicitly. His actions had always spoken for him. The way he hosted every holiday, maintained the cabin for family gatherings, kept in touch with distant relatives when others lost track, and in his final act, dividing his property among his grandchildren, he'd continued that legacy. Not by keeping everything together, as might have seemed the obvious choice for preserving family unity, but by giving each of us responsibility for a piece of the whole. In doing so, he'd ensured that we would have to communicate, to coordinate, to remain connected through our shared heritage. The house had become more than just my home. It was a gathering place, a repository of family history, a physical manifestation of continuity across generations. Lisa's cabin would serve a similar purpose, bringing us together for summers and holidays away from our everyday lives. And Michael's stewardship of Grandpa's classic cars meant family Sunday drives, car shows attended together, the ongoing story of restoration and preservation. 3 different legacies, 3 different passions, but all part of a greater whole. Grandpa's family, continuing into the future he wouldn't see but had helped to shape. The next morning, I woke early, inspired by my gardening progress and the pleasant weather forecast. After a quick breakfast, I headed to the hardware store for supplies, my mind already mapping out the day's projects. As I pushed my cart through the garden center selecting vegetable seeds and bags of organic fertilizer, a familiar voice called my name. I turned to find Diane waving from the perennial section, a flat of lavender plants in her cart. "Jenny, what perfect timing," she said, making her way toward me. "I was just thinking about calling you." "Hey, Diane," I greeted her with a hug. "No Emma today?" "School tour," she explained. "Michael took her to visit the kindergarten we're considering for next year. I'm using the free time to get some planting done." She gestured to her cart, which was filled with not just the lavender but several other flowering plants. "Our front yard needs some serious help." "Looks like you're on the right track," I approved, examining her selections. "These will look beautiful along your walkway." "That's the plan," she agreed. "But I wanted to ask you about something else. Michael mentioned you're doing some consultation work for historic homeowners." I nodded, curious about her interest. "Just starting out, but yes. Why do you ask?" "My brother Tom, you remember him from our wedding? He just bought an old Victorian in Milwaukee that needs a lot of work. He loves the house but has no idea where to start with renovations that won't destroy its character." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos before holding it out to me. "Look familiar?" I took the phone, examining the images of a classic Queen Anne with impressive woodwork, original stained glass, and sadly outdated electrical and plumbing systems, exactly the kind of property I'd been hoping to consult on. "Beautiful bones," I commented, swiping through the photos with growing interest. "Those pocket doors are amazing. And the staircase newel post. You don't see craftsmanship like that anymore." Diane grinned. "I knew you'd appreciate it. Tom's overwhelmed, though. The previous owners did some questionable updates in the 70s and 90s that need to be undone, but he doesn't want to make the same mistakes going the other direction." "That's exactly the kind of project I'm focusing on," I told her, feeling a spark of professional excitement. Helping homeowners navigate the balance between historical integrity and modern functionality. Would you be willing to talk to him? Maybe even drive down to Milwaukee to see the place in person? Diane asked. He's prepared to pay your consultation. Fee, of course. Lisa mentioned you're very reasonable compared to the big restoration firms. The casual mention of Lisa's endorsement caught me by surprise. Lisa recommended me to your brother? Diane nodded, seemingly unaware of how significant this was. She was quite enthusiastic, actually. Said you had a natural eye for historical detail and practical approach to preservation. Her words, not mine. I felt a rush of warmth at this unexpected vote of confidence from my sister. After years of Lisa dismissing my career choices as impractical or insufficient, her professional endorsement meant more than Diane could know. I'd be happy to talk with Tom, I said, making a mental note to thank Lisa during our next conversation. Have him email me some more photos and details about what he's hoping to accomplish, and we can set up a time for me to visit. Perfect. Diane beamed, clearly pleased to have solved her brother's problem so easily. He'll be thrilled. He was about to hire some big modernization firm that would have gutted all the character right out of the place. We chatted for a few more minutes about plants and family news before parting ways with promises to catch up more thoroughly at the cabin over Memorial Day weekend. As I finished my shopping and loaded supplies into my car, I found myself thinking about Lisa's recommendation, what it represented in terms of our evolving relationship. It wasn't just that she'd put in a good word for my services. It was that she genuinely believed in my expertise, respected my approach enough to stake her own reputation on it with extended family. For someone like Lisa, whose professional standing was paramount, that was no small gesture. Back home, I spent the afternoon planting, taking advantage of the mild weather and my own high spirits. As I worked, I mentally composed an email to Tom about his Victorian, already envisioning how I might help him preserve its historical features while making it livable for a modern family. This new direction in my work life felt right in a way that my previous corporate job never had. There, I'd been designing marketing materials for products I felt no connection to, following brand guidelines that left little room for creativity. Now I was helping people honor the past while building their futures, work that resonated with my own values and passions. When the last seeds were planted and the tools cleaned and put away, I took a well-earned shower and settled on the porch with my laptop. The email to Tom took shape quickly, my enthusiasm for historical renovation flowing easily onto the screen. I attached photos of my own home restoration as examples of the balance between preservation and modernization, highlighting where I'd maintained original features and where I'd made necessary updates. Just as I was about to hit send, my phone buzzed with a text message from Lisa. Diane says she ran into you today and mentioned Tom's Victorian. Hope that was okay? Thought his project would be perfect for your consultation service. His budget's decent too. I smiled, appreciating both, the business lead and the thoughtfulness behind it. I replied, more than okay. Thanks for the recommendation. Working on an email to him now. Means a lot that you thought of me. Her response came back quickly. You're the best person for the job. Besides, keeping historical properties in good hands seems to run in the family now. The simple acknowledgement brought a lump to my throat. From Lisa, it was as good as saying she'd been wrong and I'd been right about the house, about Grandpa's choice to leave it to me. I completed the email to Tom and sent it, then leaned back in my porch chair, watching as twilight settled over. My front yard. The spring flowers I'd planted years ago were beginning to emerge, perennials returning with the reliable magic of the changing seasons. The house behind me, solid and welcoming, had stood for over a century, witnessing the passage of generations, the ebb and flow of family dynamics. It had been Grandpa's haven, then briefly his burden as age made maintenance difficult, and now it was my joy and purpose. Lisa had seen the house as a possession to be acquired, a prize in the ongoing competition of our adult lives. But somewhere, between Christmas and now, she'd come to understand what Grandpa had known all along, that this place wasn't just a structure of wood and stone, but a vessel for family history, a testament to continuity and care across generations. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the spring sky, I felt a deep contentment settle over me. There would be more work tomorrow, client projects, house repairs, garden tending, but all of it felt purposeful, connected to something larger than myself. The cardinal pair that had been visiting my garden returned for one final evening appearance, the male's bright plumage still visible in the fading light as they settled in the old maple tree. Grandpa's messengers, keeping an eye on things. "We're doing okay," I told them softly. "The family's finding its way back together, just like you wanted." And somewhere, I like to think, Grandpa Thompson was nodding in approval, satisfied that his legacy was in good hands after all. Memorial Day weekend arrived with perfect weather, sunshine, gentle breezes, and temperatures warm enough for swimming but not so hot as to make outdoor activities uncomfortable. I drove the familiar route to the family cabin with windows down, singing along to the radio and enjoying the increasingly rural scenery as Madison's suburbs gave way to Wisconsin's northern forests. The last time I'd visited the cabin was before Grandpa fell ill, nearly 5 years ago. We'd celebrated his 80th birthday there. All 3 grandchildren plus our parents gathered around the massive picnic table overlooking the lake. Grandpa had insisted on grilling steaks himself, waving away all offers of help with his characteristic stubbornness. "Been cooking on this grill for 40 years, he'd said. "No reason to stop now." As I turned onto the narrow gravel road leading to the cabin, memories washed over me. Summer vacations spent swimming in the clear lake waters, nights around the campfire telling ghost stories, rainy days playing board games on the screened porch while thunderstorms raged outside. The cabin held as much family history as the house in Madison, though in a different, more concentrated form. While the house had been everyday life, the cabin was where exceptional memories were made. Lisa's silver SUV was already parked in the clearing beside the cabin, along with Mom and Dad's practical sedan. Michael and Diane hadn't arrived yet, but they had the longest drive from Milwaukee and were traveling with a 3-year-old, which inevitably meant multiple stops along the way. I parked beside Lisa's vehicle and took a moment to study the cabin's exterior. She had mentioned renovations, but from the outside, little had changed. The same weathered cedar siding, the same green-painted shutters, the same stone chimney climbing the western wall. The only obvious difference was a new metal roof, practical, and long-lasting but in the same forest green as the original asphalt shingles had been. Before I could gather my bags from the trunk, the screen door creaked open and Lisa emerged onto the porch, waving in greeting. "You made it!" she called, descending the wooden steps. "How was the drive?" "Smooth," I replied, popping the trunk. "No traffic once I got north of Wausau." I pulled out my duffel bag and a canvas tote filled with fresh herbs from my garden. "Here, I brought these from the garden like I promised. Basil, thyme, rosemary, and some early chives." Lisa accepted the tote, peering inside with genuine interest. "These look amazing. We'll definitely use them for dinner tonight. I was thinking grilled fish with herb butter." She hesitated, then added, "Using Grandpa's recipe if you still remember it." The reference to our shared culinary history caught me by surprise. Lisa and I had learned to make herb butter together under Grandpa's guidance when we were teenagers, crushing fresh herbs with coarse salt before mixing them into softened butter. It had become a cabin tradition, something we prepared together on the first night of every visit. "I remember," I assured her. "Do we have all the other ingredients?" "Salt, butter, lemon," she confirmed. "Mark's driving into town later for ice and beer. He can pick up anything else we need." I grabbed my cooler from the back seat and we headed toward the cabin together. "How long have you and Mark been here?" "Since yesterday afternoon," Lisa said. "We wanted to get everything ready before everyone arrived. Had to air the place out, make sure the water heater was working properly, that sort of thing. The casual mention of practical preparations, so different from the Lisa who once would have considered such tasks beneath her, was another small sign of how much had changed since Christmas. As we approached the porch steps, I could see more clearly what had and hadn't been altered in the renovations. The original wood siding had been carefully maintained, likely sanded and resealed rather than replaced. The green shutters looked freshly painted, but were definitely the originals. The biggest change was the porch itself, rebuilt with what looked like composite decking material, practical and long-lasting. "The porch looks great," I commented. "Smart choice on the materials." Lisa nodded, looking pleased by my approval. We went back and forth on that. I wanted to stay with natural wood for authenticity, but Mark made the practical argument that composite would last 3 times as long and need almost no maintenance. A good compromise, I agreed. Grandpa would have approved of the longevity. Actor? That's what Mark said. She held the screen door open for me. "Come see what we've done inside. I think you'll appreciate the balance we struck." The interior of the cabin was just as I remembered and entirely different, all at once. The knotty pine walls remained unchanged, their warm honey color and distinctive knot patterns exactly as they had been in my childhood. The stone fireplace still dominated the main living area, its massive hearth a gathering point for family on chilly evenings. But the furniture had been updated. The sagging, decades-old couch replaced with a comfortable-looking sectional in a practical forest. Green, the scratched coffee table swapped for a new one built of reclaimed barnwood. The kitchen, visible through an open doorway, had undergone the most significant transformation. The ancient avocado green appliances were gone, replaced by modern stainless steel versions. The Formica countertops had given way to butcher block, and the linoleum floor was now slate tile. But the original pine cabinets remained, likely refinished rather than replaced, and the layout was unchanged. "What do you think?" Lisa asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice that I rarely heard from my confident sister. "Too much? Not enough?" I set my cooler on the kitchen counter, taking a moment to really look around. "I think it's perfect," I said honestly. "You've preserved what matters, the feeling, the character, while making necessary updates for functionality." Her expression relaxed into a smile. "That was exactly what we were going for. I kept thinking about what you would do, how you'd balance preservation with practicality." The admission warmed me more than I could express. "Well, you nailed it. Grandpa would love what you've done with the place." "That's what Mom said," Lisa confirmed, looking genuinely pleased. "She and Dad are down at the dock. They walked down right after breakfast to see if the loons are nesting in the same spot this year." I smiled, picturing our parents continuing traditions that had begun in their own childhoods at this lake. "Are they? The loons, I mean." "Same spot as always," Lisa confirmed. 2 eggs in the nest. Dad's been watching them through his binoculars all morning." We spent the next hour catching up as I unpacked, and Lisa showed me the rest of the cabin. Renovations. The bathroom had indeed been updated while preserving the clawfoot tub, just as she'd mentioned in her text. The bedrooms had new mattresses, but the same charming pine furniture that had been there for generations. By noon, our parents had returned from their lakeside birdwatching, and we all gathered on the rebuilt porch for sandwiches and iced tea. The conversation flowed easily, touching on family news, work updates, and plans for the weekend ahead. "Michael called," Dad announced as we were finishing lunch. "They're about an hour out. Emma's been asking if she can go swimming immediately upon arrival." Mom laughed. "Just like her father at that age. Michael used to have his swimsuit on under his clothes for the drive up, so he could run straight to the dock." "That's not a bad idea," I said, beginning to clear the lunch dishes. "It's warm enough for swimming, and the lake looks perfect." "The water's still chilly," Lisa cautioned, "but refreshing once you get used to it. Mark and I went in yesterday afternoon." Dad raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised that his designer-clothed, salon-manicured eldest daughter had willingly submerged herself in a natural lake. Lisa caught his expression and grinned. "What? I can still swim, Dad. Some things you never forget. Like how to cannonball off the dock," I teased, remembering her teenage speciality that had reliably soaked anyone sitting nearby. She laughed, shaking her head. "Maybe not that. But Mark and I paddled around the lake in the canoe. The Johnsons next door have a new dock, by the way. Much bigger than the old one." The conversation turned to changes in the lake community. New neighbors, renovated cabins, the ongoing effort to keep the water clean and the fishing sustainable. Through it all, I found myself studying Lisa, noting the subtle but significant differences in her demeanor. She seemed more relaxed, less focused on projecting an image of flawless success. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her clothing practical for a weekend at the lake, shorts, a t-shirt, and boat shoes. The Lisa of Christmas would have arrived in designer resort wear, determined to be the most stylish person even in a rustic setting. When Michael, Diane, and Emma finally arrived, the energy level immediately increased. Emma burst from the car, with a shout of excitement, racing up the porch steps to hug each of us in turn before demanding to know where the lake was and when she could go swimming. "Let's get your things inside first, honey," Diane laughed, trying to corral the enthusiastic 3-year-old. "Then we can change into swimsuits." "I'm already wearing mine," Emma announced proudly, lifting her shirt to reveal a pink bathing suit beneath. "Daddy said I could put it on at the last rest stop." Michael shrugged, grinning as he unloaded bags from their SUV. Some traditions need to be passed down. Within 30 minutes, we had all changed into swimwear and made our way down to the dock. Emma, safely encased in floaties and a life jacket despite her protests that she was practically a fish, was the first in the water, squealing at the initial chill before declaring it the best lake ever. The adults followed at a more measured pace. Dad, never one for prolonged swimming, waded in up to his knees before declaring that sufficient and retreating to a deck chair with his binoculars to resume loon watching. Mom ventured further, floating serenely on her back in the deeper water. Michael and Diane took turns swimming with Emma between them, teaching her to kick and blow bubbles. Lisa and I found ourselves at the end of the dock, dangling our feet in the water as we had countless times in our youth. "Remember how Grandpa used to swim all the way to the floating platform and back, even in his 70s? Lisa asked, gazing across the lake to where the wooden raft still bobbed about 100 yards offshore. "Every morning, rain or shine," I nodded. He said it was better than coffee for waking up the system. "Think we should try it? For old time's sake?" I looked at her in surprise. The swim to the platform had been a rite of passage when we were children, the ultimate test of endurance and bravery. Lisa had achieved it a year before I did, a fact she'd never let me forget. "Race you there?" I suggested, the competitive spirit of childhood rising unexpectedly. Her eyes lit up with the familiar spark of challenge. "You're on 3?" We counted together, then dove into the clear lake water simultaneously. The shock of cold was invigorating, washing away the last of the drive's stiffness and the lingering hesitancy between us. We fell naturally into the rhythm of swimming, Lisa's more efficient crawl pulling her slightly ahead of my steadier breaststroke. By the time we reached the platform, we were both breathing hard, more from laughter than exertion. Lisa reached the ladder first, hauling herself up and then extending a hand to help me climb aboard. "I win," she announced, flopping onto her, back on the sun-warmed wood. "As usual." "By 2 seconds, maybe," I protested, settling beside her. "And I'm pretty sure you've been practicing," she grinned, not denying it. "Mark and I did swim out here yesterday. I might have timed myself." I laughed, unsurprised by this revelation. Some things never change. "And some things do," she said, her expression turning more thoughtful. For the better, I think. We lay in comfortable silence for a few minutes, soaking in the spring sunshine and listening to the distant sounds of Emma's delighted squeals, as Michael tossed her gently into the shallower water near the shore. "I need to thank you," Lisa said finally, turning her head to look at me directly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me," she said simply. "After Christmas, after everything I tried to do with the house, you would have been justified in writing me off completely. But you didn't. I considered this, watching a pair of dragonflies dart over the water's surface. You're my sister, Lisa. That doesn't just go away because we disagree, even about something important. For me, it wasn't really about the house," she admitted. "Not fundamentally. It was about feeling like Grandpa had chosen you over me, like I had somehow failed him, despite everything I'd done to be the perfect granddaughter." The vulnerability in her voice was something I'd rarely heard from my accomplished, confident sister. "Grandpa didn't play favorites," I said gently. "He loved all of us, just in different ways. He saw us clearly, who we really were, what we truly needed." Lisa nodded, a droplet of lake water sliding from her hair down her cheek like a tear. "I'm starting to understand that. He gave me the cabin because he knew I'd maintain it, keep it in the family. He gave you the house because he knew you'd honor its history while making it a true home." She smiled faintly. "And he gave the loan documentation to you because he knew you wouldn't use it unless you absolutely had to." "Which I did," I acknowledged, regret coloring my tone. "I'm sorry it came to that, Lisa. I never wanted to embarrass you in front of the family." "Don't be sorry," she said firmly. "I needed that wake-up call. Mark and I both did. We've made a lot of changes since Christmas. Financial counseling, debt reduction plan, completely new approach to budgeting." She smiled ruefully. "I haven't bought designer anything in 4 months." I gasped in mock horror. "Who are you and what have you done with my sister?" She laughed, splashing water at me playfully. "I'm still me, just a slightly more grounded version. And happier, honestly. There's something freeing about not constantly chasing the next status symbol." "I'm proud of you," I said sincerely. "Both of you. Changing financial habits isn't easy." "No, but it's worth it." She sat up, wringing water from her ponytail. "We've paid off 2 credit cards completely, and we're on track with the repayment plan for Grandpa's loan. Mark says we should be debt-free except for the mortgage within 18 months. "That's incredible progress," I said, genuinely impressed. "And speaking of Mark, where is he? I haven't seen him since we arrived at the lake." "Supply run to town," Lisa explained. "We needed more ice, and he wanted to pick up steaks for tomorrow night's dinner. He should be back soon." She stretched, then glanced back toward the shore. "We should probably head back before Dad sends out a search party. He's been watching us through those binoculars for the last 5 minutes." Sure enough, Dad's distinctive silhouette was visible on the dock. Binoculars trained in our direction. We waved, and he lowered them to wave back. "Race you to shore?" I suggested. Lisa grinned, already moving toward the ladder. "Loser helps with dinner prep." "Deal." We dove back into the water together, our strokes more relaxed this time, less about competition and more about the simple joy of swimming in the clear lake that had witnessed so much of our shared history. Lisa still reached the dock first, but only just, and we both collapsed on the sun-warmed boards, laughing and breathless. "Thought you two might have decided to swim to Canada," Dad commented dryly, offering each of us a towel. "Considering it," I joked, wrapping the towel around my shoulders. "But we didn't want to miss Mom's famous potato salad." The rest of the day unfolded with the relaxed rhythm that only family gatherings in familiar places can achieve. Mark returned with supplies, and we all helped prepare dinner. Grilled fish with the herb butter Lisa and I made together, just as Grandpa had taught us. Emma helped set the picnic table, arranging wildflowers in a mason jar as a centerpiece with Diane's guidance. As we gathered around the table that evening, the setting sun casting golden light across the lake, I found myself filled with a profound sense of rightness. The cabin, like the house in Madison, was more than just a structure. It was a vessel for family memories, a link between past and future generations. Lisa caught my eye across the table and raised her glass in a subtle private toast. I raised mine in return, acknowledging what didn't need to be said aloud. That Grandpa's final gift hadn't been the properties themselves, but the lessons we'd learned through them, about value beyond price tags, about stewardship rather than ownership, about the true meaning of legacy, and perhaps most importantly, about finding our way back to being sisters in the fullest sense of the word, not competitors, not strangers, but partners in preserving the family bonds that would outlast any deed or inheritance. As night fell and stars appeared above the lake, we built a campfire in the stone ring near the shore. Emma, fighting sleep despite the long day, begged for stories about when her dad and aunts were little. We obliged, taking turns recounting adventures and misadventures from our own childhood summers at the cabin. "Remember when Lisa fell out? Of the canoe reaching for water lilies?" Michael prompted, grinning at our sister. "Only because you rocked it on purpose," she retorted, but with good humor. And then Jenny jumped in to save me, even though I was already standing in waist-deep water. "I was being heroic," I protested. "How was I supposed to know we were in the shallows?" The stories continued as the fire burned down to embers, our shared history weaving us closer together with each remembered tale. Emma finally succumbed to sleep in Diane's lap, her face peaceful in the firelight. One by one, family members drifted off to bed until only Lisa and I remained by the dying fire. "This was a good idea," I said quietly, watching the last flames flicker among the coals. "Coming back to the cabin together." Lisa nodded, pulling her sweatshirt tighter against the night chill. "It felt like time, like something Grandpa would have wanted us to do." Above us, the stars shone with the extraordinary clarity only found far from city lights, their reflection dancing on the dark surface of the lake. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called, its haunting cry echoing across the water. "He'd be happy," I said, certain of this truth, "seeing us all here together." "Yes," Lisa agreed softly. "I think he would." In the comfortable silence that followed, I felt the last lingering tension between us dissolve, replaced by the stronger, deeper bonds of shared history and mutual understanding. Christmas had brought conflict, but also clarity. And here, in the place where we'd built so many childhood memories, we were creating something new yet familiar, a family reconnected, a legacy honored, a future secured. The embers glowed orange in the fire pit, providing just enough light to see Lisa's profile as she gazed out over the darkened lake. My once distant sister, now an ally in preserving what mattered most. Not the properties themselves, but what they represented: continuity, care, and the enduring connections that make a family whole. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out!